Recording. Cool. Well, welcome back. This is our third Arena Alumni Spotlight. We have an awesome guest, actually one of my favorite Academy attendees, Victor, who currently works for ACRONYM. Victor, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Just hunkering down for the home stretch, you know?
Awesome, awesome. Can you give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you used to do, and what kind of like made you come to our academy?
Yeah. I'm a corporate marketer by trade. Most of my career was spent at brands like Red Bull and Nike and Audi. I spent the past 3 years doing freelance, doing brand strategy, particularly. And throughout the time, I become a lot more interested in politics and civic engagement. And long before I even cared about politics, despite having grown up in DC in a very civically engaged family, politically engaged family, my privilege kind of blinded me, and I really couldn't care less about it. And I'd always voted in presidential elections. But never bothered to vote in any other one. I'm 41 years old, and I didn't vote in my first non-presidential election until I was 39. But long before I even cared about politics, so to speak, I always thought to myself, I was like, why are political ads just so terrible? And I was just like what would happen if we just took a little ounce of what we do at Red Bull and what we do at Nike and took it to the political space? And so when I left Audi a few years ago and went freelance, I kind of used that flexibility in time to really explore and immerse myself in politics, to start to understand the lay of the land and where some of those challenges are of creating better content and better advertising, and where the opportunities were for somebody like myself, creatives, if you will, from the advertising industry and the marketing industry and the entertainment world, who I would say are experts at telling stories and experts at communicating ideas, whatever it is, whether it's a car or a bag of coffee or toilet paper, right? They have this amazing ability to communicate these ideas, whatever they are. And so when I discovered Arena, it was a match made in heaven, because it was a perfect opportunity for me to really, like I said, immerse myself and really understand the mechanics of politics, and develop a foundation so that I could even have intelligent conversations about where the opportunities are for creatives like myself that don't come from a traditional political background.
Awesome. How was your experience at the Academy? What were some of your major highlights?
So one is just the people in the Arena community are just something else. Like, I've met some really close friends through it now. And everybody is obviously thinks already has similar ways of thinking, but at least politically, but everybody comes from such an incredibly diverse background. And I know the Arena community and the organizers have always really made a very intentional effort to make sure that it is reflective of our party and our movement, right? And so, one, I was always taken aback. Every Arena event that I've gone to, I've always been really taken aback by the diversity of the attendees, diversity of the instructors, and then just how incredible everybody's stories are, right? For me, I just wanted to meet other like-minded folks that wanted to get in the arena, wanted to take whatever skill set they had, whether that was in consulting or in banking or in advertising or already in politics, and figuring out how to apply it to move the needle. That's what was most exciting for me. And then really the amount of curriculum, like it's just, there's so much, you learn so much in such a short amount of time. And the portion of time that's dedicated to management training. I told Ravi after I went to the management training, I was like, this is the best personnel management training I've ever been to, right?
Yeah.
And I would have paid for the cost of the entire thing just for that, if not more. And I thought it was incredible. And to that end, it was also very holistic, right? It isn't just about political campaigning tactics, but it's also about how to keep your team healthy, how to, drive and encourage work-life balance, how to make sure that you're hiring equitably and you're hiring diverse people that reflect the people that you want to talk to, right? One of my favorite classes that sessions that from Arena Academy was Dr. Kira Banks and around understanding unconscious bias, right? I don't think most people that are in politics have had that opportunity to learn from somebody like Dr. Banks and apply it immediately to what they're doing on a campaign.
Awesome. So what did you do after? Tell us your decision to join Acronym and what are you doing there now?
Yeah. So when I left the Arena Academy, my intention was always to, like, I figured that I would find my way onto a political campaign in the cycle, one way or the other, whether it was tangentially helping as a consultant or, packing my bags up and moving somewhere and working working at an HQ or in the field somewhere, or it might have been just through civic engagement, right? And just getting young people to vote. Because I've always thought it's like if I can get people to buy sneakers and cars and energy drinks, like there's no reason there's no reason I can't get people to go vote. And so I was kind of feeling my way around and actually really interested in going out to South Bend to join Pete's campaign. I was getting ready to literally just pack up my bags, drive out there and just show up and be like, put me to work. Right. Because I think a lot of the times that's what it takes. It's like, is taking that leap of faith. And if you're able to, doing so, but, and then, I'd been following, I'd actually known about Acronym for some time. Because during our Arena Academy training, there are two representatives that taught a digital advertising session during my Arena Academy, and I'd been following them and noticed that, like, wow, for a group in politics, like they have an eye on design and their content is really great and feels relevant and fresh, and so I knew that we were talking the same language. I later found out that their office is literally 2 blocks from my house. And so I literally slid into Tara's DMs, Tara's our founder, and said, hey, like, can I come by and grab some coffee? Because it sounds like we're talking the same language. And, I'd just love to know, other people that are interested in really centering creative and culturally relevant creative in political work. And, lo and behold, we Tara and I hit it off, and they happened to be looking for a creative director. And I had actually been circulating that job description around to folks because I didn't think that I wanted, that's what I wanted to do. And it worked out that I think, she convinced me that Acronym was a place for me, and I couldn't agree anymore. Now, I say that Acronym is probably the best petri dish I could have asked for to really experiment creatively, digitally, across the board, and really try some unorthodox things to see if we can move the needle and push the movement forward.
That's awesome. Since the start of COVID, I felt like every campaign has moved to become a digital campaign. how has your job or how has Acronym changed during this time?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. Like our organization is a digital organization. All our work is in digital, and people think that when they look at our website and they hear about the things that we're doing, they think that we're an agency or a political consulting firm. And then some people think that we're a super PAC, and the answer is like we're a little bit of everything and not everything. So the we at the end of the day we raise money and run campaigns, digital campaigns, the way that that Tara and all of us think digital campaigns should be run. And so uh, thankfully we were really like prepared, like we operate exclusively in the digital world, so that wasn't a big transition for us, if at all. And thankfully our organization had already maybe a quarter of our folks are in cities other than Washington D.C. We have folks in New York and in Denver and the Bay Area, and in Southern California as well. And so, for a lot of our folks, switching to work from home was not much of an adjustment at all. It was the rest of us who were going into the office in DC in particular, who had to get accustomed to it. But we were already working in a distributed model. I will say, like from a creative production standpoint, there were some challenges that we needed to work through. My personal preference is, I believe that give me a room and with a whiteboard, right, and I can probably solve the world's problems, right? And now I don't have a whiteboard, right? And I think there is something to be said about being able to turn to somebody and talk through an idea in real time, that you start to lose when everybody's working from home and it's all a bunch of Zoom calls, right? I think we've adjusted really, really well. The volume of work that we've been putting out is just really, really extraordinary. And now I have team members that are literally scattered across the entire country. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit, if you can, some of the unorthodox tactics you've been able to implement as being creative director of Acronym?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we deeply believe in is this idea of building narratives, right? So I think, and to an extent, this still happens, right? But when you're a campaign, and maybe it's not a presidential campaign that has hundreds of millions of dollars, right? But like oftentimes campaigns have a very limited amount of money to spend on creative, right? And then even if you spend a ton of money on a great piece of content, you also need to reserve some money to put it on air, or to just put it on social media and put paid media behind it. And so oftentimes you find political campaigns trying to cram everything in the kitchen sink into a single piece of content, right? Or maybe two or maybe three over the course of a cycle, whatever a certain campaign can afford, right? And coming from the corporate marketing world, again, budgets and resources are a little bit different, right? In most cases, but generally speaking, is like we don't usually try to tell everything there is to know about the product or the service in one piece of content, right? Billboards have a certain objective, right, which is really just around raising awareness, right? Just name recognition, for example. And then you might have a 30 or 60-second commercial that just gives somebody a sense of a feeling, right? And again, it's also largely awareness building. And then you start breaking that 30 or 60-second spot into smaller segments like 15s or 6s or static graphics, right? And they get more specific in what they're trying to say. And so what we believe at Acronym is that, over the course of time, especially if we start talking to voters early. So we've been running a program called Soft on the Ground, which is our anti-Trump persuasion work out of our Acronym, since November of last year. And so when you start to talk to voters for 8 months instead of the last 3 months of a cycle, right? you have the opportunity to drip feed them different parts of the story. So if we're talking about tax cuts, for example, right, and how Trump has only has cut taxes for the rich, right? I don't need to try to cram every data point into each 15-second ad that I do. I can spread that over time, and I can experiment with doing something humorous and maybe something that's a little bit more factual, like more data driven, something that's a little bit more like a testimonial, right? And so we can experiment with all these different things over the course of time, right? And then identify which one works best.
So, yeah, I think that's above my pay grade,
Yeah.
but I think it's awesome. You're completely right. You're able to do that on the ground when you go door to door, right? You build relationships for 6 to 8 months. But when you think about digital ads, you just think about putting them in the last month, right before GOTV and through GOTV. Right. But I think building trust and relationship with the audience, where you can like drip feed information, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I might take that one.
Yeah. No, that one's on the house.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, but like, just thinking about like, when pre-coronavirus, when people were able to knock doors like that, imagine how powerful that is. It's like when you can combine those two things, right?
Yeah.
And so now obviously there's a pretty large dynamic shift, like shifting the dynamic. And so we just got to figure out how to do that, how to take those resources and a lot of the learnings from organizing, right? And build into digital.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to teach this weekend? For folks that don't know, ACRONYM is partnering up with Arena, and we're doing a 2-day training, just trying to teach people how to become digital, how to pivot to have a digital campaign. So can you give us like a brief overview of what you guys are going to preach?
Yeah. So it's going to be a lot of things. It's a very comprehensive training. Myself and one of my colleagues, two of my colleagues, will from the creative team will be talking about, like building creative that actually moves the needle, right? And understanding that not one size fits all. So you have to start to understand the different sort of audience segments that you need to speak to and how to speak to them differently. So, one of the things that I learned diving into politics is this whole idea of a persuasion audience, right? Like the people that are on the fence, swing voters, for example, right? People that are on the fence and it could go either way. And the importance of not creating backlash and sending them the opposite direction, right? And how that content speaks to them in a really nuanced and careful way, right? Versus what we build for the type of content that we're building for our base, right? People that already think like us, people that already vote our way, is much different from a tone standpoint and a messaging standpoint. And then also, I think there's going to be a couple of opportunities to understand what makes good digital creative, right? So the idea of like, you can't just take a TV spot and put it onto Facebook and expect it to work, right? There's certain things that make things feel native to the platforms that you're using, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, right? And making sure that you're thinking about attacking each of those platforms in a bespoke way. And also obviously, given the fact that that we are now largely in quarantine and locked down, right? You can't go and shoot your candidate out at events anymore, right? Your candidate going out and shaking hands and kissing babies and doing those usual appearances don't exist anymore. And so, how do you make the most of that situation using some of the tools that you have, that everybody has, without spending a ton of money as well, which is always a good thing on a campaign, I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if a consultant ever came up to me and said, I can teach you everything and put it on a digital platform for really cheap, I'll say sold. So do you have any advice for people looking into jumping into the electoral space?
Yeah. So I think, my first instinct when I want to learn something new or or just invest more time in something new is just to be a sponge, right? And just ravenously devour as much as you can about it, right? Go down rabbit holes and learn. Watch all the videos. Follow all the sort of opinion leaders and thought leaders in the space, and start striking up relationships. I think people are very open, especially with social media. People are so open. I mean, just as an example, just me out of the blue DMing Tara, right, and ending up where I am today, right? Like, I think people are very open, especially with social media, to offering advice and just striking up conversation. I think that's a really great starting point. I have to endorse the Arena Academy. I think there's quite literally no better event or series of events, and no better community that you can join and learn so much from so fast. Every arena event that I've ever attended, whether it's a small gathering at somebody's home or one of the larger events like a summit or an academy, I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. It is the best immersion you could ask for, and it's incredibly affordable. And for those that aren't able to afford the opportunity, I know that you guys have done an incredible job of offering scholarships to make it as accessible as possible for folks. And it's something I've really always appreciated about everything that you guys do. And then I just cannot strongly, I cannot recommend enough just going out, rolling up your sleeves and volunteering. Anytime I've ever asked anybody that wants to switch careers or go into something is go, and if you have the privilege to, right, financially and from a time standpoint, if you have the privilege to volunteer and become a super volunteer, right? Because I guarantee you, just like showing up at the doorstep of a campaign headquarters, I guarantee you they need the help, right? Organizations need the help, campaigns need the help, and they will put you to work if you're willing to put in the work. And so I understand that's a matter, that is something that requires a certain level of privilege to be able to do. But if you're able to, I strongly recommend just becoming a volunteer. And even from a small standpoint, taking an afternoon or a weekend to go knock on doors, you learn a lot in just a couple of hours of going through voter files and knocking on doors and having some conversations with real voters.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I mean, I know you're in the deep of it, in the trenches right now, especially since we don't have much of a field plan for campaigns, whether it's presidential campaigns, local campaigns, is people who can get our message across, whether it's through social media platforms or through ads that are saving our democracy. So thank you for giving me 20 minutes, and hopefully I'll see you this weekend.
Yeah, look forward to it, Chris. Thanks so much for chatting.